I'm tired, so it's nice to be in the dark.
This is your gift. You get a mead mug.
Wow, thank you.
Some chocolate and
That's
some water.
beautiful. Oh, I love chocolate. Let me just get a little energy right now before we start.
Yay!
Wow, so professional.
Do you want to scoot your chair this way, or are you okay the way you're at?
I'm going to talk at the door.
You're going to talk at the door. Welcome to In the Act, a radio program on process and the creative life. Creativity does not just start and stop with artists. We all make aesthetic or guiding decisions. Our aim is to talk through the process and investigate how we choose to express ourselves and to live creatively. We're connecting with people about their lives, and that is the subject of our show. Broadcasting from Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on Mead Community Radio, I am Erica Hunsinger, and this is In the Act. And today's guest on In the Act is Justin Favela.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yay, I'm so glad you're here. We worked it out, man.
We made it.
So great.
It's been so busy here. There's so much going on in Sheboygan in the summer. I was here in the winter before, and now it's a totally new town. It's insane,
I think the beach town vibe comes out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you're doing here?
Yeah, well, I'm currently the artist in resident over at the John Michael Kohler Arts Center.
Yeah.
I am, this installation called Workplace, where different artists, I think like every other month, have been switching out, and they've set up this this kind of version, this kind of Disneyland version of the factory. I think a couple artists.
The Kohler Factory.
The Kohler Factory.
Yeah.
So they have it kind of set up like the pottery studio and the foundry over where they have the arts and industry residency.
Yeah.
Which I'm an alumni of now.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm back there and I'm doing an installation called The Cheese That Binds Us, where we're inviting the public to come in and make a giant nacho installation with me out of piñata materials, which is usually what I use to create sculptures. And it's been really fun. It's actually the last few days I'm here.
Yeah.
And so, it's crunch time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for making the time to come in and talk about this.
Of course.
So can we backtrack a tiny bit about like what is the cheese that binds us? Like what do you mean by that? And what, cause
Yeah. Well, I initially started thinking of a installation that we could all kind of make together, like a giant installation. And I thought I definitely wanted to make something cheese related because when I did the foundry residency this past winter over at the Kohler Factory, I just hadn't eaten so much cheese in my life. And so,
Really?
And so and so seeing the factory set up at the Kohler Arts Center, and being in the factory myself and the foundry myself, I wanted to make something that was like celebratory, but then also tied it to the region that I was in, and also to kind of like the work that I do. And I've been making a lot of work in the last, 10 years about my identity as like a Latino in the art world. And so I take a lot of symbols that are thought of as Mexican or Latino. I'm half Guatemalan, half Mexican.
Okay.
And I was born in Las Vegas. So my identity is, I claim so many different identities, right?
Sure.
And so, and a lot of times when they hire me to do, workshops or activations or art exhibits, it's almost like they want to like fill this void in their programming or check a box a lot of times.
Yeah.
And people are obsessed with authenticity, right? So they're like, oh, we have this Mexican American artist coming, and what he's gonna make is like authentically whatever, So So I like to kind of troll people
in like a generic way, right?
In a generic, and be like, okay, well, I'm going to make my favorite food for you guys, nachos, right?
Yeah.
And it's like nachos, which were invented like on the border in Texas, right?
Right.
And, yeah. And so I just threw a lot of ideas out there, but I mean, that's what the nachos are all about. It's about like a celebration of my culture, but then also when you do start doing a little digging and researching the food,
Yeah.
you know, nachos are mostly eaten here in the United States,
Yeah.
and really have developed here on this side of the border,
Right.
as like a common food. Like you can go to Mexico and maybe you'll catch some nachos on the border somewhere, but that's it. That's it. There's no chips and salsa at restaurants over there, you know?
Right.
And so this gesture of me like claiming or reclaiming a food or an object like a Dorito, for example. I've been doing a lot of work about Doritos.
Yeah.
Is a way for me to just kind of poke fun at the idea, like me reclaiming this thing that never really belonged to me in the first place. And as like a first generation son of immigrants in this country, like I actually am kind of tied to things like that, like Taco Bell or like, you know, chimichangas or
Right,
the frozen margarita
growing up here.
And it's like, I really didn't even realize those weren't actual like Mexican foods until I got older, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's a way for me to kind of research these things. And also, I feel like a lot of Latino artists are expected to make work about their trauma and about like the border or about their families being left behind or about, you know, their indigeneity. And yes, I mean, my grandmother is Mayan from Guatemala. Wow. And so I could make art about that. But to me, it's more, there's so many artists that are living in Guatemala that are actually close to that culture.
Right.
Why I don't know. I just don't find it that it's my place to make art about the violence on the border because I don't experience that. Yeah. And there's so many artists that are going through that are working through things and can express them and not exploit those topics like I feel like I would be doing.
Interesting.
You know, even within my own culture, right?
Yes.
And so I'm going to make a big nacho installation and it's going to be about celebration, but it's also about kind of this whitewashing of culture that happens with floods of, you know, white and yellow cheese.
Totally. Wow. That's
what the nachos are about.
Yes. And, you know, I love the fact that you just bring like this humor to things and just like this, I went to the installation and yesterday poked my head in and stuff, and it's really beautiful as well.
Thank you.
With the different sizes of nachos too.
Yeah.
Like these giant orange, yellow, reds, triangles that are hanging and suspending in the air and spinning around. Like visually to be a part of that is, I think you use the word activation as well. But there's a dynamism to it that you know, it's sort of in your face, right?
Yeah.
But I love the fact that people then are bringing their own associations to it and that this is part of this visual language that you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun.
How has it been for people when they're creating and you're talking with them?
It's interesting. I think the most interesting thing for me is like we're hanging up these nachos in this kind of factory setting back there. And people always ask like, well, where are these going to go? And I have to keep reminding, no, this is it. They're going here. Like you're helping me make an installation.
Right.
And they're like, right. But like, is it going to, like, are you going to show it somewhere? Like, this is the art. You are part of it.
Yes.
And so I think it's such a unique experience for people that they don't really understand that.
Yeah.
And I like that about this experience. And you don't, I think a lot of people don't get the opportunity to talk to an artist in process.
No way.
And to also like collaborate.
Yes.
And so like today was really fun because I had these kids who were so into it.
Cool.
In a way that wasn't annoying, you know, because kids can, my art is tissue paper and cardboard and glue. So I think
accessible materials that everybody can
very
find.
accessible. And so a lot of museums try to get me to do kids workshops. But the thing is
because of the materials.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I don't really like that. I don't like kids. So
that's so funny.
But sometimes these kids, I mean, kids are brilliant, you know, and they will say the coolest stuff that just off the top of their heads. And and this kid was obsessed with the tomatoes because we made these little cubes like diced tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
And he kept picking them up and looking at them. And I asked him, like, do you want to pick out where we put the tomatoes on what chips you want me to glue these onto?
Yeah.
And it blew his mind away. I get to pick where they go. I was like, yeah, you're going to be my tomato helper for right now. And so we put tomatoes. So all the tomatoes that you'll see in the installation, this kid chose where the tomatoes went on the nachos.
That's
you know,
fantastic.
And it was really fun. And he was telling me about, he likes Legos and I think Minecraft. I think there's the game that they play. So it reminded him of that.
Yeah.
And he said he got some cool ideas from this installation, which was so beautiful.
That's so beautiful.
It was awesome. So there's that kind of collaboration that's happening.
Absolutely.
Every day with a project like this.
Yeah.
And it can get a little draining sometimes too, because I'm kind of just like, repeating myself over and over.
Yeah.
But there's really great staff at the museum that helps me do that.
Yeah.
It's a little challenging sometimes because I've noticed over the years of doing these kind of things with institutions is like a lot of people are, I don't know if they're skeptical of artists or like of the intent of the artist, but some people kind of come in hot, like a little hostile and like, almost like are asking you questions to kind of prove yourself to them.
Oh yeah.
You know, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And so that happened at the beginning a little bit. And then I can kind of sense when that's going to happen. I know how to shut it down now, you know.
What do you do?
Well, those people are really just,
I'm just curious.
Those people are just kind of insecure and they're what I've learned and they're just trying to be heard as well. Yeah. So when they start asking me those challenging questions, I give it to them back. And I start asking them about themselves.
Love it.
And then they just start talking about themselves. And that's what they wanted to do in the first place.
Right. And it de-escalates and creates a bridge and connection, which is what you want in the first place.
Fake interest in whatever bull they are talking about. Right. But sometimes it is very interesting. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, wow. You know, but people just want to be seen.
Absolutely.
And that's what I figured it out a few years ago. I was like, oh, these people aren't being antagonizing. It's this like jealousy kind of thing that happens. Like, how did you get to be here making tissue paper stuff?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I mean, I could do this. Yeah. I'm using cardboard and paper and
so I go, oh, great. What have you made? You know, and I'll start asking them about their techniques and stuff like that. Right. Yeah.
I think that, you know, when you were talking to about like working with the kid and that he was working with like Legos and doing like Minecraft and stuff, I feel there's like a lot of creative or active play things to do and use, and adults too. But I'm using that as an example that are finite in terms of expression and tactile and more visceral or something. Like it just, they feel very tight.
Yeah.
The material feels tight. And, you know, these are pieces that you're making that are they're like what, 3 feet by 2 feet.
Yeah, they're like giant nachos. So
and that's like having people create those and like paint them on with glue and like these big pieces of tissue. I'm sure it's like a body experience as well as like a mind thing. Like, when is the last time they've done anything that moves their arm from left to right, you know, in that motion and, you know, hands you something, you know, a large paper or something like that doesn't normally happen in their everyday lives. So even then their like physical experience of how they're transforming things in the space is really pretty amazing. So not only is it psychologically, you know, that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's this thing that I used to like roll my eyes at when I was in art school, like minimalist artwork, you know, or of the 60s. Yeah. From, I call them the great whites, you know, the canon of artists they teach us about at school. And I would just like, whenever I would see a Donald Judd or like...
Great white males, I would say, because there's very few females in any art history book.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Yeah. Because even white women are expected to make art about being white women, you know? Like, they can't just make a silver cube. Right?
No.
And so... Yeah, and so shout out to Donald Judd, but also like like Richard Serra or like artists like Sol LeWitt or
So Richard Serra did these large scale installation sculptures metal that you could walk through. They were sort of maze like and very organic looking, but were huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then who did you just say?
Sol LeWitt.
Sol LeWitt would say like directions on how to
and do
paint
these giant
things.
paintings. But he also did sculpture that was like kind of minimalist. And so when I saw that in the history books, I was like, God, how do these guys get away with this? This is bullshit, And then thinking about, and then actually. I'll never forget the moment is like also like abstract paintings, right? Like Rothko, who does these big color fields, or Pollock, who does the splatter paintings, right? And so the first time I think I was at the MoMA in New York, and I stood in front of this giant blue Rothko, and I got emotional. Because I think it was the scale and just the color. But what really was happening, what you just described about my nachos, I'm going to relate it to that.
Do it.
Is like it made me aware of how small I was, but also just like made me aware of my body.
Yeah.
And I had never had that experience in an art museum before. And I think it was just like the right color, the right time of day that painting just kind of, I feel weird saying it, but like swept me away, and I didn't realize like art could do that. And so then I started looking at the minimalist artists in a whole different way. I was like, oh, this is about recognizing space and like how much things take up and how much space you take up and how you move through the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and what they're doing is special in that way. And so I'm also thinking about that with my work, but kind of in the opposite way. I'm like, my art represents me. So I'm going to try to take up as much space as I can in this gallery at the Kohler Arts Center. So the nachos are literally like exploding all over the walls. And so, and I think that makes people feel, I don't know, some people, it just depends on the person, but some people are intimidated by that. They don't know if they could walk into the space or not.
Yeah.
And some people are just walk in and are like, oh my God, this is cool. Like this is like a playhouse,
Yeah.
And so I love that people have these different reactions. And Klaus Oldenburg, who did giant like paper mache and soft sculpture is one of my biggest inspirations. That's why I do big food sculptures. Cool. Is because of him. Yeah, when I saw his floor burger and his floor cake in person, I was like, wow, this is amazing, because it was so playful.
Yeah.
And it did the exact same thing the big, Richard Serra's did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that inspiration.
Yeah. So these people I'm hating on became my biggest inspiration, but it's also in the same school of like old Chicano artists. Chicanos like second, third, fourth generation Mexican American. Okay. Usually from like West Coast or the Southwest.
Yeah.
And so I'm technically not a Chicano because I'm first generation, but I think now it's that the labels have the boxes have kind of opened up. And so, and also like if the check clears, you can call me Chicano. That's fine. But anyway, in the school of Chicano art, parody is like a big thing, like kind of making fun of the white canon. So I feel like that's what I'm also doing.
Perfect.
I love to talk about myself.
This is so great. I love you. I think you're wonderful. This is so awesome.
I'm just trying not to go on too many tangents.
No, this is okay. So welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We are here with Justin Favela. And we were just talking, you just started talking about Chicano. And I'm not even not even comfortable with understanding what that means. I didn't understand or know that meant like third or fourth generation.
Yeah, so Chicano culture is very I see it very tied to like the Mexican American in the Southwest, mostly California, is like Chicano culture.
Okay.
So, yeah, Chicano, I mean, or Chicanx now, because it's like if you want to be more, or Chicane, like more gender inclusive.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in this exhibition right now that's touring called the Chicanx Body, Chicano Body, basically. And it's a term, yeah, that kind of that really developed, I think, in the 70s with the Chicano art movement as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like second, third, fourth, fifth generations, like Mexican Americans.
Yeah.
And
can you talk about what the Chicano art movement in the 70s was?
Yeah, I mean,
was influential.
A lot of it was parody. A lot of it was protest.
Yeah.
One of my favorite artist collectives is ASCO, ASCO, and which also means like. ASCO also means like to be grossed out by something.
Nice.
And so, there wasn't a lot of, in LA, there wasn't Chicano artwork in the LACMA, and
Sure.
so they did these performances where they tagged ASCO like on the building, or, would do these like pop-up things and make things out of paper and cardboard,
Right.
And so, and also, something that is really important to the Chicano movement and to the Chicano art movement is murals. Like the murals, the temporary murals are our monuments, and so they're very important. So you see a lot of really amazing murals. Like Judy Baca is one of my favorite muralists in LA. She did the Great Wall of LA. This really long mural that goes across the LA River, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those artists are very, very influential to me, and kind of seen as old school now because they have a lot of views that may be more progressive. Latinx people are kind of moving away from, but they are the ones that fought for us to be seen, to be visible.
Yep.
And they were also part of like queer liberation and those movements, and also like farm workers' rights. They would team up with a lot of the activists to make stuff happen. And so and
really like coming out of the, I'm sorry,
no, please.
The coming out of the taking the people into taking the artwork out of the institutional boxes that many people don't feel comfortable going into in the first place. And I think it just sounds so banal to say that they're like public murals, but it's like this is the artwork for everyone to see then. And I think there's such a powerful... I think that's so powerful. So I'm glad you brought up the murals.
And the murals are the same thing we've been talking about is like accessibility. They're in our neighborhoods, know?
Yep.
And a lot of times I'll work with museums and I'll be sitting in meetings as like almost like as a consultant sometimes, without getting paid. But that's what they do. Not anymore though. I have boundaries now with that. But a lot of times, like, we don't understand why people don't come to the museum. Like, we have the text in Spanish. We try to do, like, Cinco de Mayo and Day of the Dead stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's great. My family doesn't celebrate Day of the Dead or Cinco de Mayo. So that's a very specific Latino that you're trying to attract to your institution.
Yeah.
But then also, like, have you thought about your architecture? Like, is it welcoming? I'll never forget my grandma did not want to enter the Hamilton building at the Denver Art Museum.
Yeah.
Because it's just like it's a really cool architectural building.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of sharp points.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the entrance is a giant spike, basically. And my grandma was like, I'm not going in there. I feel like I'm going to get my head chopped off if I walk through the doors.
Right.
And I said, okay, we're not going in. My grandma doesn't feel comfortable walking through the front door.
Wow.
And the museum curator was like, well, you go through and they let us in through the side, So my grandma would feel comfortable going into the museum.
Wow.
So it's like, it's down to the architecture, right?
Absolutely it is.
And also like your hours. Like, okay, you're open till 5. Guess what? All my family gets off of work at 6.
Right.
So like... and they just can't come to the museum.
Right.
Like you're closed on their days off.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Yep.
So when it comes to accessibility, painting a mural, that's
like, who is it for?
Yeah, who is it for?
Who are you doing that for?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Usually for the donors.
Is it also, I mean, is it not MoMA, not in New York, but the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art, when they just built, like, their old one was on the street and it was really cute. And but the newer one that they built has like giant stairwell to get up to the top of the building. And it feels very like, we are important, come to, but it doesn't feel accessible. Yeah. I mean, I guess if they had like snack places like along the stairs or something, but like there is that removal of like, we're more important than or something that I think does change the perspective of having that accessible entrance.
I mean, and I get it. I love an architectural gesture, and I get it. You want to make the building seem important, but don't. It's the messaging that is like, people like, we don't get why people. You do, like, you did it to yourselves. You know what I mean? That's what I would like roll my eyes at. It's like, okay, sure, yeah. That's why you're not having any Spanish speakers come into your museum.
Right.
It's all, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking earlier about the connections between people then too, of like, if you're not messaging, if you're not being authentic about who you want your audience to be, and if you're like generically putting these like little shows on of like what you think a culture will respond to or be engaged with, I think you're kind of setting yourself up, because you're just like doing your own bubble thinking. Right? Like, you need to get outside of your source.
And I got to tell you, I'm part of the problem too. I'm part of the, at this point, I am part of the problem. I'm part of the institution, but I'm also self-aware of it, which is, I think, a little different than most. But like, from what I've learned, I've worked at museums as an administrator before. Shout out to the Neon Museum in Las Vegas. Cool. And so, and what I learned from working there, and now from working with countless museums across the U.S., Canada, and parts of Mexico and the U.K. Nobody reads like, there's only a few people that read the wall text, right? So it's like, when you're priding yourself on having these translations, like, okay, great, but it's also about the wayfinding in your museum, right? Like, is it easy to walk through the galleries? What if I'm in a wheelchair, or what if I, you know what I mean? There's so many different things to consider when you're making a space accessible to all. And it's hard, and I see museums working all the time to try to make it better, and it's just, I love it when they actually like get real and they're like, okay, let's revamp our hours, or let's talk about actually having like lower prices at the cafe so people can actually eat here, something like that makes way more of an impact than spending all this money on programming that's one night only.
Exactly. That's a great point. And part of the problem, you've excelled in your life, you've made this trajectory, and hopefully our hope is that we grow, right? And we have these better things for ourselves and more opportunities and stuff. But hopefully then you bring all your information with you, your experiences early on, so it can inform your present, right? Yeah. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I hope to learn something new every time I do something as well. I'm in a place right now in my career where I'm burned out. Like, I'm institutionally burned out.
Yeah.
Just from kind of dealing with the same things no matter where I am over and over again. And so I think I just need after this year, I'm going to take a little space and take a break from like showing at museums for a little while.
Good.
Because as an artist, as a young artist in art school, I didn't even think I would ever show in a museum. So when I started showing in museums, I'm like, okay, I got to take every opportunity I can. And now it's been over a decade of that, and I'm tired,
Yeah.
And so, but these last couple years have been like full of reflection for me, and like thinking about like, am I really making what I want to make? Am I having fun? I know it's not always about fun, but am I even enjoying this anymore?
Yep.
Or am I becoming the thing that I'm making fun of? And I think that's what's happening.
Wow.
So it's a time to kind of check myself.
Yeah.
And and so
Man,
this
that's powerful.
I'm kind of walking around a little like a zombie a little bit, phoning it in,
like disconnected a tiny bit. Yeah.
And like I've met so many cool people here in Sheboygan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I also, it's kind of like a disservice to myself and to the community because I'm not giving them my full self.
Sure.
Because I'm kind of like, just kind of walking around as like a kind of robot version of myself right now,
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang, if they would have got me 5 years ago, I would have had even more energy than I do now. But I'm this podcast, us doing this now is just making me think about that. Like, wow, I've been reflecting a lot lately about kind of my role as an artist and, the kind of this institutional critique that we're talking about right now is like, how can I do that in a way that is productive, and that is also funny and fun. And I know I'm doing it, but I know that
and generative for yourself.
But I wanted I want it to be generative for myself. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really vulnerable spaces. So thank you.
Oh yeah. Oh girl, I've been so burned out. I'm just like.
Can you talk a little bit about like you don't have to talk about.
I'm an open book. So,
you're so great. But would you talk a little bit about like your history to like how you got here?
Yeah. I
like
mean,
who you are,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't an artist until I didn't even think about making art until I was in college. So I was I was always creative.
Yeah.
I was always like a fine arts kid. I was in band in school.
Which play?
I played. Can you guess what I played?
Oh shoot!
I was in marching band too.
Oh, were you a drummer?
No, I'm a tuba player.
I was next. I was like, it was at the bass drum, and I was going for tuba next.
That's good though. That's a good
awesome.
guess. Yeah, I'm a tuba player. And low brass. I could play trombone and baritone, euphonium, all that. Whoa. And I wasn't that great at it, but in high school, like if you could carry it, they're like, great, you're a section leader,
Right.
And so, and then I even did it in college when I got to UNLV. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas.
Crazy.
Went to Las Vegas High School.
Wow.
Went to UNLV.
What is UNLV?
University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Go Rebels.
Nice.
Problematic mascot. A Confederate soldier.
Shut up.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, because Reno is in the north. So we're the South. So our mascot is a Confederate soldier with a big white mustache.
That's
wild. I know. They just stopped using him and they just used the name Rebels. And that was like in my time in school. They got rid of it, which is funny. Not funny, but tragically funny, I guess, that it's still our mascot. But it's because our basketball team was so good. They can't just get rid of the name.
Sure.
They're making too much money off the jerseys.
Right.
And so that's the bottom line usually.
ILLINI. The Illini mascot was like it's terrible. Yeah.
And so I got to college and I started playing in the bands at UNLV, like the concert classical music stuff. And then that's when I realized like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this because like the tuba players I met in college were incredible.
Oh, sure.
They would like practice for like half a day, like every day for like hours and hours. And I was like, that's not that's not my life. I don't want to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And that's when I found art. I took a drawing class. My friend now, my mentor and friend, Wendy Kvek, she was a grad student at the time at UNLV. And I took drawing, and I wasn't really great at it, but I got better and better over the semester. I was like, I really like this. And Wendy was like, would you consider switching your major to art? And I was like, I think so. She's like, I see that you're really into this. And then I took a design class, and then I took sculpture. And when I took sculpture, it was over.
Wow.
I was like, I love this. I love building things out of found objects. And that's when it just kind of unfolded for me.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so amazing. I love the transformation that like exploration and play of different places of like what you respond to and keep trying things out until something like hits you somewhere deep
It was
inside.
just easy for me. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
I get this. I get how to build things spatially. And I was using cardboard even then.
Oh, that's great.
And that,
do you remember what you built?
oh my God, I used to make a lot of really dark things back in the day. One of the first things I made, let me think. I would make a lot of figures out of like chicken wire.
Yeah.
And I used to use, because I was really influenced by Wendy, my first art teacher, and she did a lot of work about like the male gaze and like women and their bodies as gosh, I don't want to like boil it down to this, but she did a lot of work about like women and their relationship with food, for example.
Yeah.
And so she would make these videos and paintings of like women made out of meat and like bologna slices and stuff.
Wow.
And so I remember one of the first pieces I made was like this person kind of laying on the ground, and their flesh was made out of bologna. Like I like brought one of her paintings almost to life.
Wow.
So it's like my grandma was really weirded out because I was making it in her backyard. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm just like, just drying out the bologna because it's gonna shrink. So I want to make sure it shrinks before I make this thing.
That's so great. Was it life size?
It was life size.
Yeah.
It was life size. And then I started making spoofs. Like I started making replicas of different artworks around UNLV. There was this big controversy because there was a Frank Stella, a small Frank Stella painting. Like Frank Stella is just like kind of like bold colors and shapes in a geometric kind of abstraction.
Right.
I love Frank Stella's work, and the Frank Stella was like so puny that we had in the Judy Bailey Theater, I remember. And while I was there, they found out, the Stella people found out, and they're like, that's not an authentic Frank Stella. You guys got swindled.
Oh.
And I remember it was a big controversy because the university had been insuring it as a real Frank Stella.
Oh my gosh. I was like, I've never heard of a puny Frank Stella before. So weird. Okay,
it was like one of the big ones that's kind of like three like semicircles, you know, like those big ones.
Yeah.
But it was a smaller version of that. And so I remember they're like, you either need to burn it or like destroy it immediately or put a sign underneath it that says this is not a real Frank Stella.
Wow.
And so then I, being the person that I am, I made a exact replica of it out of cardboard, like really flimsy, like so it looked like it was warped.
Yeah.
And painted it the same colors and called it "This is not a Frank Stella." Oh. And like hung it up as one of my pieces. And yeah, so that was one of the first things.
That's like Magritte.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's like un pipe. Yeah. I don't even know what the thing is.
Yeah, that's one of the first like pieces that I got attention for.
Wow.
And so
I love that. I mean, I love that you're like you're pulling your strength of character and your self like coming through so strongly when you found your sculpture.
Yeah.
It's just like
I think so. I think that's what happened. I was like, oh, I can make this funny. I can make sculpture funny, and I like that. And I think Las Vegas was a cool place to do that because Vegas is so ridiculous that we could kind of get away with doing whatever we wanted, because I mean there was a little bit of a style coming out of Las Vegas because of this academic Dave Hickey, and he did a lot of he's a writer that wrote a lot about like beauty and art and like what he
okay.
thought it was. So and a lot of people make fun of it, calling him like, oh, he only likes like couch paintings, like abstract
Yeah.
paintings you can hang over couches. But
Yeah.
I really love the work that he loved too. And so a lot of the grad students were making that kind of work at
Yeah.
the time. And then he left, and that's when like my class showed up.
Wow.
And we're like, we're making stuff out of cardboard, like whatever.
I love
we were
it.
like the antithesis of that.
I love it. Yeah.
This is fun.
Yay.
I used to podcast, so this is feeling
Shoot, wait, I was supposed to say something
feeling
to
a
you.
throwback.
I was supposed to say Justin
Fabi Fab.
Fabi Fab. Darn it. I always get it wrong. I always get the punchline wrong. Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We're here with Justin Favela. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
I love where we're at in this conversation. So I'm gonna
Yeah. So
push it back on you.
I was making art with cardboard,
Yeah.
and it was like that. Again, we're always going back to accessibility, right?
Sure.
I was a broke
Yep.
college student.
Yep.
There's tons of cardboard in the recycle bins at UNLV, so
Yeah.
that's where I started making stuff out of cardboard, and
Which, also like everybody, like all teachers and instructors and everybody is like, well, that's not archival.
Right.
It's not what are you doing? You can't do that. It's going to fall apart, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Like,
but
that's a big pushback, right?
Yeah, it was a big pushback
For
but
you to do that.
There was a professor that was really influential and still is Stephen Hendy. I think he's based in Baltimore now.
Okay.
Shout out to Micah. He's over there.
Nice.
And he encouraged us to use whatever materials he wanted. He was more interested in us learning about the concepts around work. And so if you have a good concept and you're just going to make it out of cardboard just to get the ideas out, just do it.
Beautiful.
So that was I really looked up to him for like letting us experiment in that way.
Absolutely.
But there was some old school teachers who would be like, you're never going to get into a gallery making cardboard work. And I was like, okay, like that's
Right.
not the goal right now.
Right.
We're in school. We're just like learning about how to make things, you know? But one thing that all my professors kind of pushed me towards was like making art about my identity, about being Latino, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I thought that was interesting because I didn't see them saying that to any of my white, friends at the time. So I'm like, okay, well, you're not asking Thomas to make art about him being Irish or whatever he is, and so, or British or whatever.
Right.
And so I found that interesting. And so, they kept kind of bringing that up over and over again. And finally I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I'm going to do something and I thought to myself, I'll do something that's so corny, so cheesy, over the top that they'll get that I'm making fun of their request.
Right.
And that's when I made my first piñata sculpture.
Wow.
And so I made like a life-size donkey out of like fabric and chicken wire. I wanted it to have weight. And at the time, our sculpture teacher used to raise horses. So she like helped me make it like anatomically correct or whatever.
Wow.
And then I made that into a piñata.
Wow.
And it looked like a real horse had been covered in paper. And I hung it in the middle of the gallery, and it was so funny, but it was also so tragic at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it just like looked like a dead horse.
Sure it did.
Like hanging on one rope. And it was a hit. Like it blew people's minds. And I was like, okay, great, that's it. I made my piñata piece. I can move on. But like 15 years later or whatever, I'm still here making piñatas because then it like opened up this whole world of being like, oh, I can kind of poke fun at this.
Yeah.
And kind of explore my place in the art world and my identity through piñata.
Yeah.
And then, so I started making more and more like piñata objects.
Yeah.
And at first there was no rhyme or reason. I was trying to be very conceptual at first and like let the paper inform me. Like if the paper was like cherry red, I would make a red cherry with the paper, or something like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, or like I had a zebra print tissue paper. And so I made like a zebra leg that had been chopped off of a zebra or whatever, And that was fun. And then And then I did this I graduated, and years later, a couple years later, I got to do this residency in Mexico. And at that time, I was getting a lot of notoriety for making art in piñata.
Yeah.
And then I went to Mexico, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do these interventions on the street here. I'm going to make these piñatas, like criticizing colonialism and all this. I thought I was going to make these things, and I started hanging them up, and nobody reacted to them in Mexico.
Huh.
And I was so confused. And then I'm looking around, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm hanging piñatas up in Mexico where they are used to seeing piñatas.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was like, oh, I'm still trying to prove my professors wrong. I'm still making art for white people.
Whoa.
I'm not making art for myself.
Whoa.
And that's when I had a mental breakdown on the streets of Puebla, Mexico, right?
Of course you did.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not making art. I'm not making what I want. I'm just like making things, to like push people's buttons or whatever.
Right. Push back.
And push back of what do I want to make, right?
Yeah.
And so then I started going to all the churches. I was just attracted to all the churches there. And Puebla is like so Baroque. It's incredible.
Wow.
So every inch of those churches the walls are just covered in beautiful ornate decoration, right?
Wow.
And that was really influential to me at that point.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing these beautiful landscape paintings of Mexico, these kind of like colonial landscape paintings painted by Mexican people, but in a European manner.
Style,
because they were taught by like Italian and German painters, you know? And Jose Maria.
Spanish, right?
Yeah, in Spanish. And so like Jose Maria Velasco, a Mexican painter, he was like, his paintings were like the symbol of the nation before Frida and Diego and all of them, in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Late 1800s. And so I was looking at his paintings, and when I was there, Puebla is like a historical town that's like set up almost like a French, like a European town.
Sure.
And so every street, it has a different product. So there's a whole street you could buy. Every store sells candy. One street, every store sells pottery.
Wow.
One whole street, for blocks and blocks and blocks, there was a paper street. So I went and collected every color of paper that they had to develop my color palette. Sure. And I started to make piñata paintings. So I would do like color by number of the Jose Maria Velasco landscapes, and then made them into piñata. And that's when it clicked. I was like, okay, piñata is not an object, it's my medium.
Oh,
and that's when I started making paintings. I started making murals, and influenced by the churches. So then I came back to the States, and I was like, I want to go into a museum and cover every inch of the walls in piñata. And I was able to do it. The first one I did was at the Denver Art Museum. Yeah.
And there's on your Instagram, I think, right? Mm-hmm. There's an installation video of it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Uh-huh.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And it's was it community that helped out?
Yeah, and it was like so many people. Yeah, that Denver show, I still to this day, shout out to Caitlin Maestas. She's one of my besties now. She was one of the curators at the time there. Wow. But then so many of those community members that she introduced me to are still my friends to this day, because they were in there for like a whole month helping me make this, because I had never done it before and I didn't know how much labor it was going to take. But the community in Denver showed up because they were excited to see this happen, you know?
How incredible.
Yeah.
That's creative thinking. That's like transformational for you. Like that happened like that.
Yes.
That's really incredible. That's profound.
It was like a reset for me.
Yeah.
That moment, I'll never forget how I felt that day. It just switched everything for me. Yeah.
Wow.
That it completely changed the trajectory of like where I was going, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm still doing that. I'm still making murals. I'm still making objects. I make a lot of lowriders now. because I think lowriders.
The car?
Yeah.
The car.
Yeah, life-size cars, because I feel like that's like an underrated art form. That's the thing. These hierarchies within the art world bother me so much that I try to, I don't want to say elevate, but just bring attention to what I think is like fine art or my favorite kind of art. And like,
isn't that what art is?
yeah. And so like lowriders,
yeah.
I think I think it's the most American thing you could do. Like, imagine like a beat up 1964 Chevy Impala, right?
Sure,
just collecting dust for a Chicano family to be like, okay, we don't have a lot, but we'll slowly work on this thing. The whole family will pitch in.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the Valadez family specifically right now in LA, in East LA, right?
Okay.
And they're like, well, we want to do this in honor of our mom, right? So and their mom's favorite burlesque star was Gypsy Rose Lee.
Okay.
And so the Gypsy Rose, the iconic lowrider that was created in honor of this family's mother, you know, like that is so beautiful to me. And it's one of the most ornate, beautiful lowriders in the world. And then you go to places like Texas or like New Mexico, like lowrider culture spans like all over, all through Route 66, basically, all the way up to Chicago,
sure.
right?
Yep.
And so in New Mexico, that's when I was like, whoa, this is amazing, because lowrider culture isn't only about like souping up a car and making it look cool.
No.
It's about family.
Yeah.
It's about tradition. It's about making the best out of what you have.
Yeah.
It's about religion, right? You're literally resurrecting this thing and making it into your family's pride possession, the community's pride and joy.
Yeah.
And to roll around in it with pride on Sundays, you know,
right.
down the boulevard to show off this art form.
Right.
It's so beautiful to me.
Wow.
Like how proud these people are
yeah.
of this art form. And to me, it was like, I've never related to car culture. I think because of daddy issues probably, but like you know, but I can relate to that, to the feelings and the gestures and the symbolism behind lowrider culture. So I love to honor it with my piñata.
Yeah,
like celebrate it with piñata.
Well, that's the word that was coming to mind for me. That's strung through your conversations about this is celebration, because piñatas are used in celebratory times, right? Like that's like what you like when if there's a piñata at a party, then you know you're getting everybody's going to get candy. You get to have this ritual around it. There are these beautiful pieces, but it's around this celebration of community and family, and that's what I understand is your interested, connected thread through all of these things.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Thanks.
That's beautiful, man.
Thanks. When is this coming out? Do you know?
First Friday in August.
I'm coming back in October to do a performance with my family called Family Fiesta. Oh. So maybe I could talk about it because it's going to happen in the future. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, so family is a big theme in my work, and I even do a performance with my family. Like we talked about my work with all these institutions everywhere, and so a lot of times they'll approach me and ask me like, "Hey, do you have any ideas for programming?" Yeah. And one time, this is a very nutshell story. You can learn more about it in my book, actually. Ooh. If you want the full story. I have a book out. It's a monograph of my work. It's called Justin Favela Fantasia Fantasy, A Decade of Practice. Yeah. And so
fabulous.
Okay, so I went to this museum.
Yeah.
And it was one of the curator's birthdays, and he's a white dude. Everybody that worked at this museum was white. Yeah. And it was a Mexican themed party. And my brain like short circuited. Like I didn't understand what was happening.
Wow.
I was like, is this for me? Like I don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized like, oh, like Mexican is like a theme for some people for a party. Like my culture is a theme. Wow. That's wild. Or like
my culture is a theme
for a party, right? And so I found it so offensive, but everybody was like enjoying the nacho bar and the margaritas and the mariachi music station they had playing. Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is very awkward. And so that day I had a meeting with the programming folks there, and they're like, we want you to come back for family weekend in October. Would you do it? for Dia de los Muertos. I've never celebrated Dia de los Muertos in my life because I'm from northern Mexico.
Right.
We don't celebrate that in northern.
No.
So, but I was like, yes. It was like one of my first gigs. I was like, of course, I'll do it. I love Day of the Dead, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what could we do to make it a family weekend? I said, well, I mean, what's the budget? Can I bring some of my family members here and we can throw a family fiesta?
Because that's what you're talking about.
And so we were able to fly 20 of my family members out.
Shut up.
Yeah. It was cheap tickets from Vegas to this town. And we set up on the lawn of the museum and had like a barbecue, a carne asada. We had music playing, we had a piñata, we had food, and anybody that walked through the museum could join us and be part of our family for the day. Wow. So it was kind of this like protest piece in the beginning, like I'll show you what a real Mexican party is like.
Yeah, right.
And then it just became this piece about institutional inclusion and like making something accessible. And at that moment, I realized, I have something here. Because it was the first time a lot of the gardeners and the maintenance workers felt comfortable bringing their families to the museum that day.
Totally.
Right? And so now I think we're on the 12th year of it.
No way.
And so I try to do at least one a year with my family. And so I'm collaborating with the Kohler Arts Center. And we're bringing Family Fiesta to Sheboygan on October 26th at the Arts Center. So 20 of my family members will be here and we're going to party. And it changes.
Fantastic.
It changes with every institution we do it at. It's a collaboration, and I love that. Like, there's a strong polka community here, and so
right.
And my family's from northern Mexico, and our music derives from polka and the Germans that were hiding out in Mexico for a while.
Right.
And so I'm excited to bring them to because I think they're gonna love. I think they're going to love Sheboygan. It's going to be so fun.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. I know we're running out of time. Is there, in this tiny little piece of time, is there anything else you'd like to share before you go? Or that you want to impart, or I don't know.
Oh. Yeah, I think my biggest message, is to support creativity. And I think this is what we're doing here today, right? Talking about that. And because I feel like I would have had a little bit more confidence in the beginning of my career if my creativity was supported as a kid, and I experience so many parents now in museums when I'm working that support their kids and support their wacky ideas and what they're doing. And oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to what the future holds, because there's more and more kids that are being supported in that way and encouraged to be independent thinkers and make things out of whatever they want and just have fun from an earlier age. And, yes, it's a privilege to be able to do that. And my parents were, allowed me, even though there was a lot of pushback, because, how are you going to make money being an artist? That was the biggest question from my grandparents and my mom. And I still to this day have to lie and tell them I'm an art professor, an art teacher. Because technically I am a teacher, I guess,
Yep.
But just support creativity in every way, especially when it comes to the young ones. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really, really, really value this conversation with you. Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. You are so easy to talk to. Thank you for having me. You brought it out in me.
Yay.
Yes.
And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
Well, you go to justinfavela.com, which will direct you to my Instagram. And you can see my links on there and how to get my book and where I'll be next. And excellent. I'm trying to post updates there every week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
so much. Huge thanks to Mead Public Library, the fantastic Melissa Prentice, Josh Littner, Annalisa Finca, the radio committee, our amazing engineer John Tully, and for the title, Photo and Fabulous, theme music composed and performed by Cooper Deers.
In the Act is produced in the studios at Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. More information on the web at meadpl.org.